India for inviting PCPC to speak today on some exciting developments taking place in the United States. Again, apologies. I wish I could be there. I wish India was closer to the United States and we didn't have a meeting that I had to be at today. But again, thank you for inviting us to speak on the United States Modernization of Cosmetic Regulation Act, or as we call it, Mocra, which I know sounds like a coffee, but that's what we call it. So Mocra is an amendment to the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act, which is, as you know, the primary law that regulates cosmetics in the United States. The cosmetics section of the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act is a primary law, and Mocra is an amendment to it. President Biden signed Mocra into law in December of 2022, so it just had its first birthday. We are excited about these developments. Industry was very supportive of these changes. We at PCPC, working with our members of the US Congress, FDA, have been advocating for this development in the United States, and we are pleased for the updates, and I will walk you through kind of the basic pieces of Mocra and how it's going to be implemented in the United States. So, as I mentioned, Mocra is an amendment to the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act. It gives new responsibilities to the industry, and it also gives new authorities to FDA. Where Mocra does not touch, so these are the areas that Mocra regulates, the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act still remains law in the United States. You can see here, these are the overview, the places that Mocra will be changing for the cosmetic regulation in the United States. I'm just going to minimize this. Facility registration and product listing. This is something new in the United States. We want to stress for international audiences that this is not an approval process. This is not pre-market approval. You are only notifying FDA of facilities that are manufacturing cosmetics that are being distributed in the United States, and you're only notifying FDA of products being sold, marketed in the United States. It's instantaneous approval. Just letting FDA, it's not a pre-approval process. That's just some things we're hearing that people are saying it's the United States has moved to pre-market approval, and that's not true. There'll be more requirements for industry on safety substantiation and adverse events. There are new labeling requirements within Mocra. FDA will have to issue a rulemaking on a good manufacturing practice standards and also the labeling of fragrance allergen disclosures. There's also the new authorities on FDA will have new authorities to be able to access company records, to suspend facilities, and to issue recalls. And also, because the way the United States works, each state has the ability to issue its own regulations and laws. So there's a clause within Mocra that's called national uniformity, and it touches on pieces where Mocra regulates that it supersedes legislation in states. Anything that is not the same. So this is just a quick overview of the areas that Mocra is of Mocra. This is a timeline. Mocra will be phased in within times. It's not an automatically being implemented. With PCPC's advocacy, the registration of facilities and product listing of products has been delayed. FDA was issued enforcement discretion that delayed the requirement for this till July the 1st, 2024, which is coming up, and we'll go into more detail on what those requirements are. Adverse event reporting, that requirement is in effect now. It went into effect December 29th, 2023. Safety substantiation, having to maintain the records for safety substantiation is now in effect. FDA now has the authority to do mandatory recalls. Labeling of professional products, that is now in effect. FDA will have to issue a test message for asbestos. That is delayed. It was supposed to come out earlier this month. We know it's with a branch of the US government now, so we expect that to come out soon. FDA sometime this year will have to issue a rule on labeling of fragrance allergens. The labeling of contact information of the responsible person, that will be coming up soon. Then good manufacturing rule, which will be final rule be issued in December 2025. And then FDA will issue a PFAS cosmetic report. So these are all pieces that are in the legislation of Mocra and the timelines that the law has set out. There are key new definitions within Mocra that we want to make you aware of, and I'll walk you through some of those key definitions. One is the responsible person. We know the EU also has a responsible person, but when you're thinking of Mocra, I want you to realize the responsibility of a responsible person is different. A responsible person within Mocra is different than the responsible person in the EU. Within Mocra, the responsible person is the manufacturer, packer, or distributor of a cosmetic product whose name appears on the label of the label. So this is not a real person. It is the name of the cosmetic company that is manufacturing, packing, or distributing that cosmetic product in the United States. This also includes companies located out of the United States. So if you're a foreign company that's manufacturing, packing, or distributing a cosmetic product for the United States, the name of your company needs to be on the label, and that's what the responsible person. Responsible person can be based anywhere in the world. They do not need to be based in the United States. There's also a new definition for a cosmetic product, and we recently received additional guidance from FDA on clarification on what exactly is a cosmetic product, which is the preparation of cosmetic ingredients with a qualitatively and quantitatively set composition for use in a finished product. It does not include cosmetic ingredients. Cosmetic ingredients are not considered a cosmetic product in Mocra. It does include final formulations that have not yet been packaged. It includes final formulations marketed for use by consumers and or professionals. So these are two key definitions that you need to be aware of when looking to comply with the new requirements in Mocra. Another one is the facility. And the reason this one is important, as I mentioned before, there's mandatory facility registration with FDA. So you need to understand what a facility is and what the requirements are, and we'll walk through that. So under Mocra, a facility is any establishment, including establishments that are importers. So, an establishment that's importing a product into the United States that manufactures or processes cosmetic products distributed in the United States. So if you are a facility that is manufacturing or processing a cosmetic product that will be distributed in the United States, if you're an establishment that is doing that, then you are considered a facility under Mocra. You see here, there are some exclusions, and throughout Mocra, we'll talk about it. There are exclusions throughout. There are exclusions for small businesses and things like that. But I just wanted to highlight here that there are exclusions for trade shows. If establishment is manufacturing cosmetics solely for research, solely performing. If this establishment is only doing the labeling, relabeling, packaging, repackaging, holding, or distributing, that is not considered a facility. But if you are filling a product with a container with a cosmetic product, so if the cosmetic is open to the environment, then you are considered a facility under Mocra. And facilities that are manufacturing products that will be distributed or in the United States, foreign facilities have to register with FDA in facilities in the United States have to register with FDA. And we'll talk about the different requirements for foreign facilities and domestic facilities. I talked about how Mocra places new responsibilities on industry. And within this slide, I think it really highlights where those responsibilities are being placed. So, as I mentioned, a facility has to register with FDA. It's not a pre-market approval, it's only a notification of your facility. Also, you will need to comply with the GMP standard. Right now, we have a draft, I think it's a draft voluntary standard, GMP in the United States. FDA under Mocra has to issue a mandatory GMP standard. So the facility will have to comply with that. A responsible person. So the company, whose name, as we mentioned before, whose name is on the label of the product, they will have to be responsible for, and again, the responsible person is the manufacturer, the packer, distributor of a cosmetic product whose name appears on the label. They are responsible for the product listings with FDA, collecting adverse events that take place in the United States and keeping records of those, and reporting any serious adverse events to FDA. We'll go into more detail about that. Ensuring the safety of the product, ensuring the safety substantiation and keeping records of that. Ensuring the product is labeled correctly and also labeled with, following the new fragrant allergen disclosure requirements that FDA will have to issue. And also ensuring, when required, that they are able to produce the fragrance records to FDA when they are requested. And we'll talk about when FDA can ask for a company's records specifically around fragrances. Ingredient suppliers have implications, but they do not directly have new responsibilities. But we like to highlight that ingredient suppliers may have to help the responsible person with fragrance allergen disclosure. They may have to help the responsible person identify fragrance allergens and correctly label them. Under Mocra, if FDA requests to see a company's fragrance allergen records, a responsible person can ask the ingredient suppliers to provide that directly to FDA, and they may also have to help the responsible person substantiate the safety of an ingredient within a product. So we look at it that within Mocra, there are new responsibilities for facilities, responsible persons, and then also for the ingredient suppliers trying to help their customers, the responsible person. Facility registration and product listing. So this is a new requirement under Mocra. Owners or operators must register their facilities that manufacture or process cosmetic products for distribution in the United States. That is for foreign facilities as well. If you are manufacturing or processing a cosmetic that's being distributed in the United States, you must be registered. So for example, say I'm a third-party manufacturer in India and I am selling my product to someone in the United States and they are distributing in the United States, my facility still needs to be registered with FDA because my product that I manufactured in my facility is being distributed in the United States. We'll talk about there is a special requirement for facilities outside the United States, and we'll talk about that requirement as well. Responsible person, I think I've mentioned this, but just to highlight again, as we talked about, their responsibility is to list all the cosmetic products marketed in the United States. So all of the cosmetic products that company is marketing in the United States. If you are a small business, which throughout Mocra, there are exemptions for small businesses, you do not have to register your facility or list your product with FDA. And we'll talk about, there are some requirements, there are some, not a true definition, but there is a requirement to meet if you're a small business. And we'll talk about that later on in the presentation. The first step that you need to do, and we say if you take anything away from this presentation and you're looking to, you're manufacturing a product for the US market, or you are distributing a product for manufacturing or packing a product for the that'll be distributed in the United States. The first step you need to do is to get a FDA Establishment Identifier Number, FEI. You have to get this before you can register your facility or list your product. You can see on the slide, it shows you the ways to do this. Just in the request. It takes 7 to 10 days to get it from FDA. But first, before you request, we recommend that you search the FEI search portal to ensure that your facility or your company does not already have an FEI number, because they will only issue one per facility and one per company. A facility may already have one if it has connection with other FDA business, which is, that facility is, manufacturing a over-the-counter drug, or manufacturing a pharmaceutical product, or, manufacturing a food product or something like that, because other industries other business that FDA has with other sectors already have an FEI number. So now it is now required for the cosmetic industry. And this is the information you can see here on the slide that you will have to give when you are requesting your FEI number. Cosmetic Direct is the primary portal, the primary method on how to register your facility and list your products. Is the primary method. There are other ways to do it. There's the SPLX forms, there's paper forms, but FDA would like to see them electronically. But Cosmetic Direct, which was launched in December this last month, is the platform that you will use to register your facility or to list your products. FDA has issued guidances around this, which you can see here. There's a guidance for industry on how to do it. A direct user guide, more on the SPL piece. And then there's also a decision tool facility to help companies on further understanding how to register a facility or list a product. Deadlines. Let's talk a little bit about when this will be required. If your facility is first engaged in manufacturing or processing for distribution in the United States, so if you started on December the 29th, 2022, you have to register your facility no later than July 1st of this year. So you have to do it by July 1st of this year. If it's after December the 29th, or you have to do it by 60 days after the first manufacturing or processing for the United States. So 60 days after you process or manufacture a product for the United States, you must ensure your facility is registered with FDA. Registration happens biannually. So you have to renew your registration biannually. And you have to, if there's any changes to the registration of your facility, it has to be conducted within these 60 days of any changes, including canceled registration. So with any changes, you have to update FDA within 60 days. I mentioned for foreign facilities, there is additional requirement. FDA is requiring foreign facilities, and this is only for foreign facilities, a U.S. agent. And the reason for that is FDA wants to be able to contact somebody in the United States if there is a problem with that facility, if they need to talk to someone about that facility. PCPC has advocated that FDA adopt the definition that they use for a U.S. agent for other industries. We're pleased that they have, which is U.S. agent is the person who includes an individual or business entity that resides in the United States or maintains a U.S. place of business and is physically present in the United States. This here is what shows you what you need to provide for registration fields. I will clarify though, the US agent has to be based in the United States. It cannot be a mailbox, answer machine, or service. It has to be an individual acting as the foreign facilities agent, and they have to be present. So they have to be, accessible. So that is the one requirement if you are a foreign facility registering with FDA, you will be required to have a US agent, and that is because FDA wants to be able to contact somebody based in the United States in case there is an adverse event or there is a problem with the facility, they believe, or the product coming from that facility. Product listings. The deadline for when a responsible person needs to ensure a product is listed with FDA. Again, this is only a notification. You're just letting FDA know what products you are marketing for the United States. The deadline is July the 1st, 2024. So if you've been marketing by, starting December the 29th, 2022, you need to ensure that your products are listed by July of this year. If you are doing that, if it's a new product you're looking to put on the market with FDA, and you have 120 days after you market that product in the United States. So after that product is on the market in the United States, you have 120 days then to list it within Cosmetic Direct with FDA. Or, if you know already it's coming July 1st, 2024. You renew listings annually. So it happens once a year. You update your product listings with FDA. And when you renew your listings, that's when you make your updates or, including you discontinue listings or anything like that. You only need to make updates when you renew your listings once a year. So we at PCPC, since this is the first key piece and new requirements that are being implemented within Mocra, PCPC has been actively advocating for some of the requirements around the product listing and, the product listing and facility registration. Within the law of Mocra, the deadline for facility registration product listing was December the 29th, 2023. PCPC advocated with FDA, constantly talked with FDA, and FDA understood that companies needed more time to be able to comply with this requirement. So FDA was able to issue enforcement discretion, which I talked about before, which is what extended the compliance deadline to July the 1st, 2024. We've been working with FDA and with our members to ensure Cosmetic Direct features are easy and not burdensome for industry to be able to register their products, to list their products. And you see here some of the pieces that we've been pushing for and advocating for that FDA has granted for us. And we're pleased that, and we continue to advocate for additional changes within Cosmetic Direct to make it the least burdensome as possible for industry. We also pushed and advocated for FDA to provide additional guidance, information on the FBI number, and also, to give us a clear definition on the U.S. agent, and that is some things that FDA has issued for us and provided to us within the last couple of months. Another resource that PCPC has, we have developed a checklist on registration and listings. This checklist has been shared with our sister associations around the world for them to share with their membership. The intent of the checklist is because there are new requirements around, registering a facility. You need to ensure that if you want to list your products, that the facility that they're coming from is registered. We have created this checklist to facilitate communication between companies on registering and listing activities. It's flexible. It's just a guidance. It is just a document to help companies with other companies when they're looking to register their facilities or list their products with FDA. And happy to, should provide that with any PCPC members or International Trade Association colleagues. Oh. Yes. Adverse events. This went into effect December the 29th, 2023. Under Mocra, the new requirement is that companies must maintain records of all adverse events that have taken place in the United States. You only need to maintain records for adverse events in the United States. You need to maintain those records for a period of 6 years. This is a new requirement to maintain these records. If you're a small business, you need to maintain those records for 3 years. Also, FDA is able to inspect these records, to review these records during inspections, and we'll talk about that. What are the requirements and when they can review adverse event records? Serious adverse events must be reported to FDA within 15 business days. So that is a new requirement. Any serious events taking place in the United States must be reported to FDA within 15 business day. And we have here a link to the form that you have to fill out to provide to FDA here. That requirement went into effect just last month. The additional labeling requirements within Mocra just build on the existing requirements that were in the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act and the Fair Packaging and Labeling Act in the United States. The requirement to name there's the label, the cosmetic product with the name and place of the business and manufacturer, packager, or distributor. So it is the requirement to label the responsible person on the package, which again, the responsible person is the company that is manufacturing, packing, or distributing the cosmetic product. It's not a real person, it is the name of the company. For adverse event reporting requirements, the responsible person, you need to have a contact information, somebody that the consumer can contact in case there is adverse events. The requirements around that are, if you are going to put an address, it needs to be a US address or phone number, or an electronic contact information, such as a website. So if you're a foreign, a foreign company and you're responsible person, you can use your website as a way the way consumers can report an adverse event. This will go in the labeling requirements. The deadline for that is December the 29th, 2024. So by the end of this year, those are going to be on the package. Professional products, this is a new requirement, must comply with all the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act and Fair Packaging and Labeling Act labeling requirements, and that is in effect now. So professional products now need to comply with the labeling requirements in those two laws. Safety substantiation. This is something we've been requiring cosmetics in the United States since 1975 to ensure adequate safety of a product being placed on the market in the United States. The new requirement under Mocra, which is now in effect, is that you have to ensure you maintain the records supporting the adequate safety of the substantiation. You have to maintain the records to prove the safety of that product. And here you see what safe means. The cosmetic product is non-injurious to users under the condition of use prescribed and the labeling thereof under customary or usual name. And so that is the standard of safety in the United States, and that is the same standard that was in the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act. Fragrances, there are some new changes under fragrances. FDA is to issue a rulemaking a new rule for labeling disclosure requirements for fragrance allergens. Within Mocra, it clearly states to when FDA is doing this, they need to take into consideration international, state, and local requirements. And then it specifically says, including the EU. This does not mean they need to follow other international requirements or the EU, what they're doing for fragrance allergen disclosures, but that is just, they need to take it into consideration when they are drafting this new rule. The other piece is, when can FDA ask to review, request a list of fragrance flavor ingredients from a company? So this is a new authority for FDA, and FDA can request this if there's reasonable evidence that a product or ingredient contributed to a serious adverse event. If they believe that has happened, then FDA can request from the responsible person the list of fragrance or flavor ingredient. The responsible person must ensure that is submitted to FDA within 30 days. It is clearly stated within Mocra, FDA cannot disclose the fragrance list. It is to be kept confidential. Good manufacturing practice. This is another rulemaking that FDA will have to issue. FDA will have to establish a GMP standard. When developing this, they need to shall be consistent and practical, appropriate within national and international standards. So they need to take into consideration national and international standards. Last year, FDA did their first, we call them listening sessions in the United States, where they put out a request to hear from companies, from industry, and from stakeholders around the world on what they would like to see on a GMP standard. So FDA is already starting to think about the regulation that they will need to issue. Around, I think it was a large turnout. I know PCPC presented at it. Our colleagues at Cosmetic Europe also spoke at it as well. But the thing to remember is FDA needs to makes sure that it's consistent, if practical, and appropriate with national and international standards. The regulation must be focused on requirements needed to protect public health and ensure that cosmetic products are not adulterated. And there's also, if its facility is a small business, then the requirements will be simplified. If you're a very small business, then you will be exempt from having to follow the good manufacturing practice, the standard that will be issued. So they will be simplified for small businesses. And then if for very small businesses, you are exempt. So that is issuing a good manufacturing regulation is a new requirement for FDA under Mocra. National uniformity. In the United States, I mentioned before, states are able to issue their own laws and regulation, but there is a piece within Mocra that states that Mocra preempts any state or local laws that differ on registration, product listing, good manufacturing practice, records, recalls, adverse event reporting, or safety substantiation. Those are the pieces, if you remember, that Mocra touches on. Mocra does not handle ingredients. So states may still continue to limit or ban use of cosmetic ingredients in cosmetic products and may continue ingredient reporting requirements that predate Mocra. So the ingredient bans in California and the reporting requirements in California are going to stay in other states. So, but if a state differs on the registration, product listing, good manufacturing practices, records, adverse event reporting, or safety substantiation, the requirements in Mocra preempt the state laws. I know I've touched on this a couple of times, so here we are finally, small businesses. there are considerations for small businesses throughout Mocra, and there are also considerations for very small business within Mocra. A small business, FDA's regulation has to provide, FDA's regulation on GMP, as I mentioned, has to provide fixed flexibility and simplified requirements for small businesses. And they get longer compliance period to comply with a GMP standard. And this is a question we get quite a bit, how does FDA define a very small business, since there are quite a few exemptions for very small businesses throughout Mocra, as in they're exempt from the GMP following the GMP, complying with the GMP standard. They're exempt from registering their facility or listing products, and they only need to keep adverse event record keeping for 3 years versus the 6 years. This is defined, and then we'll go into, there is kind of how they define it, which is the annual sales, but then there are also exemptions for for a very small business as well. But for annual sales, if you within the United States previous 3-year period is less than $1 million, then you are considered a small business. So if your annual sales of your product being sold in the United States is in the 3-year period is less than $1 million, then you are considered a very small business. However, if you are a very small business and you meet the annual sales requirement, but you create a product, you manufacture or distribute a product that comes in regular contact with the mucous membrane of the eye, is injected, intended for your internal use, or alters the appearance more than 24 hours and removal by consumers is not customary, you have to follow all of the all the other requirements of Mocra. You will have to still comply with the GMP requirement, the registration of the facility, the product listing. You will need to keep your adverse events for rather than 6 years. So even if you're a small business, but you create products that are in the exceptions list, you will have to follow the general requirements. FDA is given some additional authorities, as we talked about, we've hinted on throughout this presentation on Mocra, and one is the ability to access records. But there are requirements around how FDA is able to access these records. So if it's just a general routine inspection, FDA is just coming to your facility to inspect, disinfect. It's nothing, due to an adverse event or, concern over an adulterated product. FDA, just on a general inspection, can access, but it's limited to what they can access is limited to the adverse event reporting, and the GMPs. That is all they can request to review if it's just a general inspection. However, if FDA believes that a cosmetic product is likely to be adulterated such that exposure presents a threat of serious adverse health consequences or death to humans, each responsible person and facility shall allow FDA to have access to the safety substantiation information, which is, if you remember, that is a new requirement to maintain your records for safety substantiation for products, and they can access your shipment data. So if they believe that a cosmetic product ingredient, and other cosmetic product ingredients are, adulterated, that can cause serious adverse health consequences or death, they will have the ability to review adverse events, GMPs, safety substantiation, and shipment data. This does not extend to, they do not have the ability to request cosmetic formulas, recipes, financial, pricing, sales, personal, or research data. They're not able to request those records. They're only able to request adverse event, GMP, safety substantiation, and shipment data. I hope that's clear, because I know it's a little convoluted, but there are 2 ways that FDA can request records from a company. Another new tool is FDA has the ability to suspend a facility's registration. Um, this is it's going to be done very judiciously because this can only be done by the FDA commissioner, which the FDA commissioner is the top person within FDA. They have to approve that this is going to happen. And if the standard is how FDA determines that, that a facility registration needs to be suspended is a reasonable probability of causing serious adverse health consequences or death to humans, and a reasonable belief that other products manufactured and processed by the facility may be similarly affected. So it has to be two pieces that you meet, that there's a probability of a serious adverse event, adverse health consequences, and they believe of other products manufactured in that facility can lead to similarly serious adverse health consequences. Again, a facility registration, a suspension of facility registration can only be can be approved by FDA commissioner, who is the most senior person within FDA. There's more detailed procedures that FDA has to follow within the actual Mocra law. Another tool that FDA has at their disposal under Mocra is the ability to recall products, recall authority. Before, FDA used to issue voluntary recalls. Under Mocra, they had the ability to now issue mandatory recalls. This again can only be done, it has to be approved by the FDA commissioner. And the standard FDA determines that if a product needs to be recalled, if there's reasonable probability that a cosmetic product is adulterated or misbranded, and the use or exposure to such cosmetics will cause serious adverse health consequences or death. So FDA now has the ability to recall products, suspend facilities, and access records from a company, but there's clear standards that FDA has to follow and rules FDA has to follow when using these tools within Mocra. PCPC, as I mentioned before, was very supportive of Mocra, and we been working on this with industry and with our colleagues and around the world, and we've been pushing for this as Mocra is being implemented in the United States. We continue to have conversation with FDAs, advocate on behalf of our industry, working with them on the new requirements in Mocra. We have working group meetings constantly with our members, discussing the new requirements, what they would like to see in those requirements. And then we're working with our sister associations around the world to ensure that a global perspective is being brought to Mocra. This is just a brief so you can see how the advocacy structure is within Mocra, within PCPC. We have a working group for all of these different new requirements within Mocra, the new areas that Mocra touches on. Those working groups work together on developing position on, draft regulations or comments to FDA. And then we also are working with FDA directly in developing working with FDA as well, constant conversations with FDA on all this and relaying what PCPC, these working groups, would like to see. PCPC has also played the lead on industry coordination, and global industry coordination. We will continue to do so. We have been working with our sister associations, with associations around the world on, coordinating comments on good manufacturing practices. As I mentioned, there was a public meeting in Cosmetic Europe spoke at it. There has been, you see here, under facility registration and product listing, there has been several opportunities for international associations to provide comments to FDA on that process. And then we will continue to be working with the international, with the global industry on the other rules that'll be coming forward, the test method, fragrance allergen labeling, and the final good manufacturing practice standard that will come out. We've also been leading on education. We feel it is our duty to ensure that industry around the world and even regulators around the world understand what changes are taking place in the United States, how Mocra amends the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act, what those new requirements are. So you can see here some examples of, what the presentations we have held and who we've held them for since Mocra was signed into law by President Biden in December of 2022. And just to recap, I think this slide is very important because it talks about key Mocra dates of when the new responsibilities for industry will take effect, what new regulations or new rules we see coming about, and also talks about guidelines we expect FDA to be issuing. So at the end of last month, serious adverse event reporting went into effect. Maintaining safety substantiation records went into effect. Now the responsible person needs to be keeping that. Professional use labeling, as I mentioned, the professional use products now need to follow the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act and Fair Packaging and Labeling Act requirements, and those products now need to be labeled. That went into effect on December the 29th, 2023. This year, on July 1st, registration of your facility and product listing, the compliance deadline will be in July 1st. And then contact information on the labels for adverse events, that will take place on December 29th, at the end of this year. You will have to have that labeled on your product. It is delayed, but we think soon FDA will be issuing the talc test method draft. And then 180 days after they receive comments from stakeholders, a final test method will be issued. Fragrance allergen labeling, a draft, FDA within Mocra, FDA is to issue a draft fragrance allergen labeling rule by June the 29th of this year. Then they have 180 days after receiving comments to issue a final one. Draft GMP standard is to come out on December the 29th, the end of this year. And then we think the final GMP will come out on December the 29th, 2025. We do not know when these new rules will go into effect. These are just the deadlines within Mocra, within the law, that state when FDA has to issue these rules. We don't know what the grace period will be for when industry will need to comply. And then we expect FDA to issue a guideline to further explain mandatory recalls, that new tool that they're able to do. The other new tool is records access. We think additional guidelines will come on that. There's a cosmetic labeling guideline already. We expect FDA to update that to reflect the new labeling requirements for fragrance allergens and for also, having professional use and contact information. And then FDA will have to withdraw or revise the existing draft GMP guidance that's out there. And there could be other regulations or guidances coming out, but these are the ones that we are aware of right now. And with that, I will take any questions that we have.
Hi, Nathalie, it's Birgit. I should know that. But the labeling for professional use, when we have, when we get a labeling requirement in Europe, we have like a timeline of 24 months or 18 months to do the labeling. But what for me, what is really strange is that the requirement is there from 23rd of December. What happens if a product is not labeled? If there is an old product on the market, does that has to be taken back from the market, or is it only for new products coming?
That's a great piece. I'll have to get back to you for sure, Birgit. I don't know if they are pulling products already from the market. I just know that's the deadline. But we've known about this for the past year. I will say we've known since December 2022 that this deadline was coming up. So I'm sure industry is starting to prepare and comply with that since then.
Okay, thanks.
I'll have to get back. Yeah.
Okay.
First of all, thanks for the nice presentation. If someone who is manufacturing in India and going to export the products in US, how does Mocra will apply? Because it might come under that small business entity, because they might not have that 1 lakh USD in last 3 years. So how does it will impact for someone who is exporting the products from India to US? Number one. And number two, whatever guidelines which you said that you got certain guidelines from the FDA, are those available on the PCPC website?
Yeah, I'm sorry, it was a little fuzzy, but I think you said what are the requirements if a facility is exporting to the United States? Yes, if you're exporting to the United States, and you are not a small business or a very small business, as I mentioned, then you have to register your facility. You have to, and as I mentioned, the only guidance we have right now, there is additional guidance from FDA on kind of like the product exemptions, but the only definition we have right now for a small business is the $1 million threshold over 3 years. So that's the only way that you could be exempt from having to do that facility registration. But if you are a foreign facility manufacturing a product and exporting it that'll be distributed in the United States, then you will need to register your facility and have a U.S. agent for that facility. I hope that's clear. I don't know if that was your question.
Clear.
And there is, and there is a little bit more guidance from FDA, but there's not, and I don't know if there'll be any more, but there's a little bit more guidance that FDA has put out on the small business. I believe it's on our website, but if not, we can direct you. I think it's in the PowerPoint. The guidances have come out that provide more information on small businesses.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
So Nathalie, thank you. Nice presentation. Just a quick question on safety substantiation. You mentioned that the record access would be requested only if there is a reason to believe that there is some injury to the consumers, right? So is there a difference between record access and asking for data? In usual audits, FDA might ask for safety substantiation data, right? Without any reason to believe that there is injury. Or am I right in knowing that?
No, FDA can only ask for that information if they believe the product will cause serious adverse health or is adulterated. That's the only time that they can ask for that safety substantiation information.
Okay.
To access it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, thanks.
Yep.
Hi Natalie, it's Geeta. Great presentation. Just one question, and I just can't believe it. You said there is exemption for small businesses from GMP even. Like, how does that justify? Like, you can be a small business, but you still would have to follow some GMP protocol, right? Or
so there's 2 exemptions, and I know it's not clear, and we think FDA may issue additional guidance on small business. If you're a small business, then you will have easier, let's paraphrase, I can pull it back up, but I don't know exact language, but you will have extended timeline to comply and easier compliance, easier requirements to meet. If you're a very small business, which is a $1 million threshold in 3 years, you do not need to comply with the GMP standard.
Okay, that's clear. And one more question. You said ingredients are out of the purview of Mocra, so ingredients are not included. So, but fragrance allergens, there is a regulation. So, I didn't get, like, would ingredients be completely like out of the purview of the regulation, and only fragrance allergens would be included, or what? I'm not clear.
So fragrance allergen, it's disclosure, it's the labeling of the
Okay.
fragrance allergen. So
Okay.
FDA has to issue a rule on that, and that's what it touches on. And then the other piece for fragrances is there is the new way that FDA can ask to review those records, to see those fragrance allergen records. That's the piece. The ingredient piece, Geeta, is that states can still continue to ban or have reporting requirements. You know how different states in the United States, unfortunately, different states have ban different ingredients or different reporting requirements. Those can still stay in place. Mocra does not supersede it. So is that clear? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, but as a part of the registration, we have to register a formula, or no? It's just a facility registration.
No, for facility, you have to register your facility. For product listing, you have to put like the ingredients, but it's just kind of like what's on the INCI label.
Okay. And would it be like a exact formula, or would it be a range?
It's not an exact formula. No,
Okay.
It's a range. And I think it's, to be honest, it just came out, and I don't want to answer incorrectly. So
Okay.
I don't want to guess, but I think it's just, you have to just list the ingredients. You don't put any range or anything on it. You just list the ingredients within the product.
Okay. Thank you, Nathalie. Thank you so much.
I think that's about it, Nathalie. Appreciate your time and efforts, really. We missed having you here in person. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Yes, thank you for having me, and I hope to see you everyone in person maybe next year.
Hopefully we see you next year.
Yes.
See you soon.
Thank you. Bye.